Isabella Hawthorne disappeared in front of 100 people, and the cameras caught everything except the moment she actually vanished. The first time I watched Isabella Hawthorne disappear, it was in slow motion on a grainy hotel security feed. Christmas lights shimmering in the background, guests drifting through the lobby of the Hawthorne Holiday Inn, snow beyond the glass doors falling in thick white curtains, and at exactly 8:37 p.m., a young woman in a red dress turned toward the camera, smiled like she knew a secret, and stepped out of frame. She never stepped back in. That's where the official story usually ends. This is where mine starts. Welcome to my channel. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. My name is Emily Sharp, and I run a moderately successful true crime channel from a kitchen table in a cramped apartment 3 states away from where Isabella vanished. I didn't know her when she was alive. By the time I heard her name, her smiling face was already a frozen symbol. Holiday in Heiress vanishes on Christmas Eve, the kind of tidy headline that makes strangers feel a brief stab of curiosity and then move on. I probably would have too if not for the email. It didn't have a subject. The sender field just said unknown. No text in the body, just one attachment, Christmas Eve Isabella fur. I almost deleted it. I get weird stuff constantly. People asking me to solve drama with their exes, links to sketchy, leaked footage that turns out to be clickbait. But there was something about that name, Isabella, that made me hover over the trash icon just a second longer, then double-click. The video opened on a wide, high-angle shot of a hotel lobby I recognized immediately. I'd been there once for a cousin's wedding. Stone fireplace, fake antique chandeliers, carpet in a busy pattern that looked like someone had spilled holly berries and decided to make it a motif. The timestamp in the corner read 12/24, 2036 and 41 seconds. The frame was full of movement. A Santa in a cheap red suit ringing a bell near a donation box, kids squealing as they ran past, a front desk clerk in a navy blazer typing furiously, the glow of a towering Christmas tree off to one side. For a few seconds, it was all regular holiday chaos. Then she walked into the frame. Even from that grainy distance, you could tell Isabella Hawthorne was used to being looked at. Dark hair swept into a loose twist, black coat folded over one arm, a red dress that managed to look sophisticated and festive instead of tacky. She moved through the lobby like she owned it, nodding at guests, pausing to straighten a wreath, leaning over the front desk to sign something on a clipboard. The night manager, thin, pale, familiar from old news footage as Paul Redding, laughed at something she said, shook his head, and pointed toward the far end of the lobby where a set of glass doors led to the side garden. She glanced at him, then at her phone, and her expression changed in a way that made my stomach tighten. Her smile flickered. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. She typed something quickly on the screen, slid the phone into her clutch, and picked up her coat. Then, in that strange, silent video, she turned toward the camera, toward me, watching years later in the light of my laptop, and her lips moved. No audio, just the ghost of a word, 3 syllables, maybe 2. Then she pivoted and walked out of frame toward the glass doors at 20:37 and 2 seconds. The timestamp ticked on, 20:37 and 3 seconds, 20:37 and 4 seconds. People milled. Santa rang his bell. A child tripped and cried. No one followed her. No one came running back. In the next hour of footage, she never appeared again. When the video cut to black, I realized I'd been holding my breath. I did what everyone does when something claws at their curiosity in the age of the internet. I opened a new tab and typed her name. Isabella Hawthorne disappearance. The search results unfurled like a digital graveyard. Local news clips, national segments, threadbare blog posts with titles like The Christmas Eve Heiress Mystery, 7 Theories. A half-finished Wikipedia page with that gray tag shouting at me, this article is a stub. You can help by expanding it. The facts, as repeated everywhere, were simple and chilling. Isabella, 24, only daughter of Daniel and Margaret Hawthorne, owners of a small but mighty hotel empire, had spent Christmas Eve at the family's flagship property in Riverwood, New Hampshire, overseeing preparations for the annual gala. At 8:30 p.m., she told staff she was going to check on the outdoor holiday display. At 9 o'clock p.m., someone realized she hadn't come back. At 9:15 p.m., an informal search began. At 10:02 p.m., someone called 911. Her car, a sleek black Mercedes with the Hawthorne crest on the hood, still sat in its usual spot out front. Her coat, staff later said, was missing from the closet. Her phone and purse were behind the desk. There were no footprints in the fresh snow leading away from the building, no signs of a struggle in the garden, no ransom note, no suspicious activity on credit cards, no texts, no posts, no calls after 8:22 p.m. It was as if she'd stepped through an invisible door. Beneath the early articles, those breathless first 48-hour pieces reporters throw together while the story's hot, later interviews grew darker, parents pleading, friends insisting she'd never run away, officials saying they were pursuing every lead. One quote from the lead detective repeated itself across different outlets. "We have reason to believe Miss Hawthorne's disappearance is not just a missing person case. There are elements suggesting planning, manipulation, and the possibility of multiple parties. Until we find concrete evidence, it remains unsolved." His name was Detective Robert Lane, and by the time I found his statements, 3 years had passed since Isabella vanished, and the word unsolved had turned from a promise into a curse. I leaned back in my chair, the chair legs squeaking against my kitchen tile, and stared at my paused screen. In the thumbnail, Isabella is mid-step, hair swinging, head turned slightly toward the camera as if she has something to say. I felt that strange little tug in my chest that I've learned to recognize, the sense that a story is about to crawl into my life and refuse to leave. So I did what I always do when that happens. I hit record. Tonight's story, I told my viewers, starts with a video that shouldn't exist. I showed them a brief, blurred clip enough to give context without compromising evidence. I shared the basics. The heiress, the hotel, the Christmas Eve timeline. I asked the question that has become a cliche on my channel but still works every time. What do you think happened after she stepped out of frame? Then I uploaded, tagged, and waited. The comments flooded in faster than usual. Some viewers remembered the case. Some claimed they'd stayed at the Hawthorne Holiday Inn before it got creepy. A few local usernames argued in threads about whether the family was stuck up or actually generous if you knew them. Most people did what people always do. Picked a theory and defended it like a sports team. She ran away with a secret lover. She slipped on the ice, fell in the river, and was swept away. Her family had her killed to stop her from exposing something. The fiancé, I hadn't even known there was one yet, did it for the money. The longer I watched people argue, the more something in me hardened. If there's one thing I've learned from doing this, it's that when a story becomes entertainment, the person at the center of it stops being real. I closed the tab, ready to call it a night. Then I saw a new comment pop up, buried under the noise, from an account with no profile picture and a nonsense username. RW Ghost 1979. "You're late to the party, Emily," it read. "The hotel isn't the only thing that's haunted in this story. Check the Riverwood Gazette archives for January 12, basement fire." Accountants don't just vanish. I didn't sleep much after that. The Riverwood Gazette's website looked as old as the town. Half the links were broken. Headlines loaded crooked on my phone. But I fought my way into the digital archives, scrolled through the January 12 issue for the year after Isabella disappeared, and found it. A short, bland article with the headline, "Minor Fire in Hawthorne Holiday in Basement No Injuries." According to the piece, an electrical malfunction in a storage office had caused a small blaze in the basement. Sprinklers activated, firefighters responded, damage minimal. The fire chief was quoted as saying, "Could have been worse, lots of old paper down there." No one seemed particularly concerned. Until I scrolled further and found another article 2 weeks later. Local accountant missing, car found abandoned. The accompanying photo showed a man in his 50s with a receding hairline and wary eyes, Thomas Wexler. The article said he'd been an accountant for Hawthorne Holdings for over a decade, last seen leaving work on a Friday afternoon. His car turned up at a park-and-ride lot off the highway, keys in the ignition. No signs of foul play, police said. "We are concerned but not suspicious at this time." The phrase made my teeth ache. I sat there in the blue light of my laptop and put the pieces together. Heiress goes missing Christmas Eve. 3 weeks later, tiny fire in the basement accounting office full of old paper. A few days after that, the longtime accountant disappears. If this were a script, I'd be accused of making it too obvious. Real life, of course, almost never hands you this neat a line of dominoes, which meant either I was overreaching or someone had already done a lot of the reaching and wanted me to notice. I glanced at my inbox. The anonymous sender of the video hadn't written again. No subject lines, no hints. Just that one file dropped into my life like a match in a dry forest. It suddenly felt wrong to keep talking about the case from a distance, recycling other outlets' reporting. If someone with access to evidence had decided to drag me into this, I needed to look them in the eye. So I booked a ticket. Riverwood, New Hampshire is one of those towns that looks like a postcard if you squint. Main Street lined with brick storefronts, each one wrapped in twinkling lights. A bakery that smells like sugar and nostalgia. A hardware store that's been there since forever if the faded photos in the window are true. The air bites your cheeks the second you step off the bus. I dragged my suitcase through the snow, following GPS directions until the Hawthorne Holiday Inn rose into view at the edge of town. It was bigger than most of the buildings around it, but not ostentatious. Stone facade, wide steps, glass doors under a green awning with the hawthorn crest, stylized oak tree, cursive ribbon. I stood across the street for a long moment, watching people go in and out. Christmas decorations still hugged the entrance 3 years after the worst Christmas Eve in the hotel's history. Garlands, a wreath, lights wound around railings. If you didn't know, you'd never guess this place was a crime scene. Inside, the lobby looked almost exactly like it had in the video. Same fireplace, same huge tree, this one with slightly less extravagant ornaments, same reception desk. The only real difference was the energy. No gala, no Santa, just soft music and the dull murmur of business travelers and families checking in. The woman at the front desk, the same one from the night before in my memory of the footage, just older, looked up as I approached. Her name tag read CLAIRE. "Welcome to the Hawthorne," she said automatically. "Checking in?" "Yes," I said, giving the name I'd booked under. She typed, frowned for half a second, then smiled. "3 nights and a king," she said. "First time in Riverwood." "Second," I lied. "Last time was for a wedding, years ago. I remember the big Christmas Eve party. You don't do that anymore." For the smallest fraction of a second, something passed over her face, a flinch almost before she smoothed it away. "Management decided to scale back the holiday events," she said. "We focus on family packages now." "Makes sense," I said lightly, even though it didn't. "Too much work." Her smile was polite, practiced. "Enjoy your stay, Miss Sharp." I hesitated. "Do you ever get YouTubers here?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up to mine. For a moment the facade cracked and I saw a flicker of recognition. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "My sister watches a lot of YouTube, true crime mostly." "It's addictive," I said. "You should be careful, those people dig up all sorts of things." Something almost like a warning flickered across her features. Then she handed me my key and pointed toward the elevator. I walked the route Isabella had taken in the video 3 times that afternoon. From the front desk, past the lobby seating area, toward the glass doors that led to the side garden. In daylight, the garden was charming, snowy bushes wrapped in lights, a path cut through the drifts, the river just visible through trees. In the camera feed, that doorway was a portal. Cross it and you left the story behind. Standing there in person, I realized there were no security cameras aimed at that door now, or if there were, they were small and well hidden. The lobby camera that had captured Isabella's last known steps sat in its glass dome in the corner of the ceiling, dark and inscrutable. I craned my neck, imagining her looking up, mouth moving. Later, Lane, wait. If she had said his name, who had she expected to be watching? I didn't expect to meet Detective Lane that first night. I certainly didn't expect him to recognize me, but as I stepped outside after dinner, pulling my coat tighter against the wind, a voice called from near the parking lot, "If you're going out to stand where she stood, at least wear better shoes." I turned. A man in his late 40s leaned against a dark sedan, hands buried in the pockets of a worn overcoat. His hair was shot through with gray, beard a few days past intentional. The circles under his eyes suggested more years of bad sleep than he'd care to admit. "I've seen your videos," he said as he approached. "You make better coffee than most network hosts." "High praise," I said warily. "Detective Lane, I'm guessing." "You're guessing right," he said. "This is the part where I tell you to go home and mind your own business." "Is that what you're going to do?" I asked. "No," he said, "because I know how people like you work. If I push too hard, you just dig deeper to prove a point. The best I can hope for is to give you enough context that you don't get yourself or someone else killed." There was something in his tone that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "So you're not thrilled I'm here," I said. "Thrilled." He laughed once without humor. "Let's just say anonymous leaks of restricted footage don't make my life easier. But the fact that someone wants you looking at this now means there's a game afoot, and I'd rather see at least some of the cards on the table." We ended up in the dim hotel bar, alone except for a bartender pretending not to listen as he dried glasses. Lane ordered coffee. I ordered something that came with a slice of lime and more burn than flavor. "3 months after she vanished," he said, turning his mug between his hands, "I got a package at my office. No sender, no note. Just a snow globe of this hotel. Inside, glued to the base, was a tiny cutout of Isabella holding a piece of paper that said, 'Find the truth or you'll be next.' Like they were taunting you," I said. "Or testing whether I'd jump at every shadow," he replied. Second year, someone mailed the Gazette a Christmas card, family photo of the Hawthorns from 2 years before she disappeared. Someone had carefully cut her out of it, taped her image inside a sympathy card, and written, "Thinking of you." A chill threaded through my spine. "You think it was the same sender?" I asked. "Same style, same care taken to leave no viable prints, smudged postmarks," he said. "If it was a different person, they'd read the case file like an instruction manual." "Then the accountant goes missing," I said. Wexler, Lane nodded. "He'd been twitchy for weeks leading up to it. His wife said he kept saying he'd found a pattern in the numbers. The week before he vanished, the basement fire happened. Old files got ruined, not all of them." "Just enough. You think someone burned the evidence," I said. "I think someone burned the easiest version of it," he corrected. "Paper leaves ash, money leaves trails, so do people." We talked until the bar closed, about the family, the way the town closed ranks after the disappearance, the unspoken rules of places where one surname appears on half the buildings. I asked him bluntly if he thought the Hawthorns were involved. He didn't answer immediately. "In a town like this," he finally said, "you're either benefiting from the Hawthorns, owing the Hawthorns, or trying desperately not to be noticed by the Hawthorns. That kind of gravity pulls everything. Whether they lit the match themselves or just built the tinder pile, that's a different question." When I mentioned the video and the way Isabella's lips seemed to form his name, he grew very still. "She called me the week before," he said quietly. "Said she was worried about internal security. Asked what would happen if she brought me proof of financial misconduct connected to the hotel. I told her I'd follow the evidence." He gave a humorless little huff. "I didn't think about how many toes that evidence would step on." "You couldn't have known," I said automatically. He met my eyes. "I've been a cop 22 years. You always know. You just pretend you don't because it's easier to sleep if you act surprised when people get hurt for doing the right thing." That sentence felt like a weight in the air between us. Over the next 2 days, I slipped between roles: tourist, guest, investigator, storyteller. I walked the garden path where she'd supposedly gone to check the light display. I counted my steps from the lobby to the point where the camera lost her, 11 at my pace. I stood on the cleared walkway as snow fell thick and fast, imagining a woman in a red dress and black coat stepping into the cold alone. I met Claire in a diner on the edge of town after her shift. Without her blazer and bun, she looked younger, vulnerable, chewing her thumbnail as we talked. She was focused that night, Claire told me. I'd worked every Christmas Eve gala since I was 16, and she was usually in her element. Smiling, schmoozing, remember everyone's name type. But that night her phone kept buzzing. She'd look at it like it was a grenade. She told the night manager she'd be back in 15 minutes. She took her coat. She wasn't the kind of person to forget something like that. Did she say where she was really going? I asked. Claire stirred her coffee. She said she was checking the lights. But when she leaned over to sign the VIP list, she whispered, if he thinks he can pull this on Christmas Eve, and stopped when she realized I'd heard. He who? I pressed. She didn't say, Claire replied, voice small. After she was gone, the family's lawyers came. They wanted to know exactly what she'd said, but only if it fit into what they'd already decided she meant. When I tried to say she seemed upset, they smiled and suggested I was misinterpreting her usual intensity. They made me sign a statement. I was 19. I didn't know you were allowed to say no. Her eyes filled. I know what I saw, she said. She was scared, but she was also furious. That's not the face of someone who decided to vanish for fun. At the Driftwood, a low-ceilinged bar that smelled like old beer, fryer grease, and secrets, Claire's words wouldn't stop rattling around in my head. Scared but furious was not the profile of a woman quietly planning to disappear and sip cocktails on a beach under a new name. I nursed a flat soda at the corner of the bar, trying not to look like someone who'd spent the last 3 hours mentally rearranging the crime scene. The bartender, a woman with half her hair dyed green and a tattoo of a compass on her forearm, slid a bowl of pretzels toward me. You're the YouTube girl, right? She said, the one poking the hawthorn bear. Apparently, I said, does it say that on my forehead? She smirked. Word gets around, Nate, your fan club finally showed up, she called down the bar. At the far end, a man in his 30s hunched over a beer, his shoulders rounded like he was trying to fold himself in half. He wore a faded maintenance sweatshirt with the Hawthorne H cracked and peeling across the chest. He turned his head just enough to look at me, tired eyes, stubble, the kind of guy who looked like he could fix a boiler in a blizzard. I don't have a fan club, he muttered, but he didn't move away when the bartender waved me down the bar. This is Nate, she said. He used to keep the Hawthorne from burning down every winter. She winked at him until it almost did. Thanks, Jess, he said dryly, then looked at me. You buying into all this? All what? I asked. The ghost stories, the conspiracies, the evil hotel thing, he said. Or is that just good for views? Both, I said honestly. I don't think the building is evil if that's what you mean. But I do think a lot of people have worked really hard to make sure we never see the whole picture. And I think when an heiress disappears and an accountant vanishes and a basement full of financial records just happens to catch fire, it's worth more than a paragraph on page 3. He stared at me for a long moment, then snorted. You talk like Lane, but with more caffeine. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. You were in maintenance, right? You were working that night. For my sins, he said. Yeah, I was, in the basement mostly. Trying to keep the circuits from blowing because some genius decided we needed 3 industrial freezers plugged into an outlet meant for a lamp. I leaned on the bar. Walk me through it. He took a long drink like every word cost him. It was the usual Christmas Eve circus, he said. Gala upstairs, kitchen screaming for more ice, front desk screaming about guest room heat, you know. Around 8:15, I get a call from Paul, night manager, saying the lights on the east side of the garden are flickering. Outdoor extension cords, crappy connections, water, ice, it happens. I told him I'd check the panel. He set his glass down carefully. The main panel's in the basement, down the hall from the old records office. Those rooms are a maze, walls added, walls torn out, cables running places they have no business going. I'm down there when the cameras flicker for a second on the monitor. It's nothing, really, just a hiccup. But around 8:37, the log shows manual override for the east exterior camera, not a glitch. Someone put in a code. From where? I asked. Security office, he said, or a terminal linked to it. I flag it in my head, but I'm busy trying not to fry Christmas. A few minutes later, everything goes quiet on that feed. No error message, just dark. 10 minutes after that, it's back like nothing happened. By then, I'm fixing a leak and the night keeps rolling. Until 9, when all hell breaks loose upstairs because someone realizes the princess is missing. And you told someone about the manual override, I said. He gave a humorless laugh. Of course, I'm not suicidal, I told Kessler. Head of security, I said. I'd seen the name in an article, a quote about respecting the family's privacy. Head of making things go away, Nate said. Ex-cop from the city, walks like he's still on SWAT. I showed him the log. He looked at it, shut the binder, and said, "System glitches all the time. You want to keep your job, don't start seeing patterns where there aren't any." Next week, my hours got cut. Month after that, I'm let go due to restructuring. Did you tell Lane? I asked. Nate's jaw worked. You ever try to call a detective with nothing but hey, a camera turned off at the wrong time and no job to back you up, he said. I thought about it. Then my rent came due and the Hawthorne's shadow kept falling over everything, and I figured, what's one more thing they got away with? A TV over the bar droned in the background, some game no one was really watching. Nate stared up at it without seeing it. You know what the worst part is, he said. I liked her, I barely knew her, but she came down to the basement once, heels and everything, and asked why the breaker room smelled like burnt toast. Most people with money never go below the lobby. She cared about how things actually worked. She shouldn't have been the one to disappear. I thought about the burned old paper, the missing accountant, the ghost of a camera feed blinking out at 8:37 p.m. What do you know about the winter ghost? I asked. His eyes snapped back to mine. Jess, polishing a glass nearby, went very still. That's bar talk, he said after a beat. Stories to scare new hires. You shouldn't put that in your little videos. That sounds like a yes, I said. He sighed, then lowered his voice, leaning closer. It's not a person, he said. Not really. It's a name people use when money moves where it shouldn't and something bad happens to whoever asks why. Deals that don't show up on paper but everyone knows about. Projects that get approved with no one quite sure who signed off. And if you push too hard, someone says, "Careful, you'll wake the winter ghost," like it's a joke. He swallowed. It's not a joke. You think Isabella was poking the winter ghost, I said. I think she was trying to turn on a light in a room a lot of people profit from keeping dark, he said, and somebody made sure the bulb blew. That night back in my hotel room, I lined up everything I'd learned like evidence in a video. Isabella, sharper and more involved in the business than people gave her credit for, a fiancé whose job was to restructure risk, ghost bookings and shell companies, a head of security who didn't like questions. A maintenance guy fired for noticing a camera switched off the moment she walked into the cold. A missing accountant whose office had burned just enough. A detective being taunted every Christmas with little reminders that he'd failed. And behind all of it, a whispered name, Winter Ghost. I recorded again before I left Riverwood, sitting cross-legged on the bed with the camera propped on a stack of hotel brochures. Okay, I told my viewers, here's what I can tell you now that I couldn't when this started. I walked them through Riverwood, the lobby, Claire's shaken recollections, Nate's story about the camera override, the basement fire, Wexler's abandoned car. I kept names where they were already public, blurred details that weren't, made it clear what was confirmed and what was speculation. I didn't mention the bar talk about the winter ghost by name yet. That felt like invoking something I didn't understand. When the video went up 2 days later, my channel did what it always does when a story has teeth. It chewed. Viewers clipped the section where I slowed the footage to show Isabella's mouth, arguing in the comments over whether she was saying Lane, later, or something else entirely. People in cheap hotel rooms across the country watched a rich girl in a red dress walk toward a garden door and vanish, over and over like some cursed gif. A few local accounts popped up to call me a vulture. Some thanked me for not letting them forget her. And then, buried between a sea of armchair detectives and emoji, a new comment appeared from a familiar nonsense username, RW Ghost 1979. You're still not asking the right question, it said. You're chasing the night she vanished. You should be chasing the nights she stayed. Check the VIP bookings. Who did she refuse? Who did she let in anyway? I stared at the words until my eyes hurt. Whoever this was, they weren't just trawling old articles. They knew the internal language of the case. The VIP list Claire mentioned, the subtle power Isabella held as gatekeeper to the gala and the hotel's most exclusive spaces. I emailed Lane the screenshot with a simple subject line. Your friend wrote back. He called 2 minutes later. You at home? He asked. Yeah, I said. You sound thrilled. I sound like a man who just watched his unsolved case become a group project, he said. Meet me halfway. There's a diner off Aminus 89 with terrible pie and decent coffee. Tomorrow at noon. And bring your laptop. The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly over the parking lot as snow flurried sideways in the wind. Lane was already in a corner booth when I walked in, a manila folder beside his coffee. He nodded toward my bag. "Show me," he said. I slid into the opposite seat and opened my laptop, pulling up the comment. He read it twice, jaw tightening. "VIP bookings," he said. "We pulled those, obviously, for the gala for the hotel itself. They were interesting." "How interesting?" I asked. "The Hawthorns hosted a lot of unofficial meetings under the guise of holiday cheer," he said. "Developers, local politicians, out-of-town investors, people who preferred not to be seen together in official minutes. Some of them booked rooms under their own names. Others used corporate aliases. A few used nothing house comps. And Isabella controlled that?" I asked. "She had veto power," he said. "Who got a seat at the table, who got invited to the post-gala nightcap in the smaller lounges, who got turned away." Wexler's notes, he tapped the folder, suggest she started pushing back that year, questioning why certain people got free rooms when the hotel was supposedly tightening its belt, asking about phantom invoices. I thought of the comment, who did she refuse? Who did she let in anyway? "You think she blocked someone who wasn't used to hearing no?" I said. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe she let someone in despite her better judgment and realized too late what that choice cost." He slid the folder toward me. Inside were copies of guest lists from the last 3 years of Hawthorne Christmas Eve galas. Some names were familiar from the news: local mayor, state rep, prominent business owners. Others were blank to me. Out of state LLCS, a pharma rep, a regional bank VP, a consultant with no clear field. Next to some names, in a neat hand I recognized from the margins of the USB files later, were small marks. Plus signs, minus signs, question marks. "Isabella's?" I asked, pointing. "According to Claire, yeah," he said. "Her shorthand, plus meant good for the brand. Minus meant over my dead body. Question mark meant watch this one." I followed the symbols down the page. On the year she disappeared, one cluster stood out, a group of 3 attendees all marked with question marks. Their affiliations were vague: 2 developers, 1 strategic advisor. All 3 had been comped rooms. "These 3?" I asked. Lane nodded slowly. "They all had meetings with Hawthorne Holdings in the months after," he said, "talking about expansion opportunities, asset consolidation, the kind of language that makes lawyers lick their lips. Then, when the case went cold and the family closed ranks, those meetings expanded. Not enough for charges, enough to make my stomach turn." I snapped photos with my phone because my brain never trusts a single copy of anything now. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Why not keep it tight until the state decides to actually do something?" He gave me a look like he was tired of holding something heavy alone. "Because whoever is sending you these breadcrumbs clearly has access I don't," he said. "Because they're trying to triangulate you, me, and the Hawthorns into the same story again. I'd rather know where the lines cross than pretend we're not on the same board." "Do you trust Andrew?" I asked. He snorted. "I trust him to look out for himself," he said. "But I don't think he ordered a hit on his fiancé, if that's what you're asking. Men like him ruin lives with signatures, not shovels." He didn't know about the email yet. About the Boston Cafe, the USB, the way Andrew had said in the snow like he'd rehearsed it. I weighed telling him and decided, for once, to wait. I wanted to see what was on that drive first. Back home, I plugged the USB into a cheap, isolated laptop I kept for exactly this kind of paranoia. A folder popped up, tidy and organized. /ledgers/emails/scans/notes. I opened a ledger file at random. It was a spreadsheet of room bookings versus revenue, lines of numbers that made my eyes glaze until I saw the pattern. Certain rooms that were always technically occupied, always paid in full by a rotating set of shell companies, and yet never appeared on housekeeping schedules. No check-ins, no minibar charges, no housekeeping notes like left phone charger called guest, ghost rooms. In an email thread, I saw Wexler asking a Hawthorne executive for clarification. These corporate guests, Riverwood Dev Partners, Blackstone Ridge Capital, etc., do we have physical contracts on file or are these via verbal agreements? The response was a curt, "Stop worrying about what's above your pay grade. Just make sure the numbers balance." /SCANS were fragments of burned pages, literally. Someone had photographed half-charred documents where bits of sentences remained. Transfer to RDP Act as discussed. Comp package for consultant in RM 412. Adjust ledger before audit. On one in the corner were two handwritten words in Isabella's neat script, "Ask Lane." My heart punched hard against my ribs. In slash notes, lines of her thoughts sprawled across photos of receipts, screenshots, even a picture of the basement hallway. Wexler nervous. Check his car logs. Why is Kessler so fixated on East Camera? If Dad knew about this, would he stop it or bury it? Don't know which scares me more. One note, captured as a photo of a sticky note on what looked like her laptop, said, "If anything happens to me, the story still gets out. That's the only protection that actually works." The next video I made wasn't the explosive reveal some viewers wanted. It was calmer, more deliberate. I explained ghost rooms in simple terms. Spaces in the hotel used as placeholders for money that didn't exist or shouldn't exist. I showed them anonymized versions of the ledgers, redacting names that would have gotten me sued into oblivion. I talked about how financial crimes don't look like movie villains with briefcases full of cash. They look like someone quietly turning a 4 into a 9 and signing a name that looks almost right. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I looked directly into the camera and said, "If you are the person sending me this, I hear you, I see what you're doing, but you're not just toying with Lane anymore. You're playing with a whole town, a whole family, a whole audience. If you want the truth out, drop the theatrics and send the full file to the state attorney general. If you want attention, congratulations, you have it." But Isabella isn't a game piece. The reaction was intense. My inbox filled with people praising me for calling them out, accusing me of putting myself in danger, or demanding I reveal every name on the documents for transparency. Some wanted justice. Some just wanted blood. It was hard to tell which was which. 3 days later, another envelope slid under my apartment door. My heart rate tripled. This one was heavier, thick. I stared at it for a full minute before picking it up with a dish towel like that would somehow keep it from biting me. Inside was a stack of printed emails, some I'd already seen on the USB, some new. On top was a post-it in neat, blocky handwriting, "Stop asking me to trust the system. It's the reason she's gone. Tell it your way, that's why you're here." Underneath the note, one email subject line jumped out, "Ray. Incident Contingency, Holiday Inn." It was from an address belonging to a Hawthorne legal consultant, sent a week before Isabella vanished, forwarded to a Riverwood Development Partners contact. The body was short. "If our asset expresses concerns about internal irregularities, we can frame it as a mental health issue. Keep all public remarks focused on her stress and sudden change in behavior. In the unlikely event she acts impulsively, we already have the narrative. Our asset. Not daughter, not fiancé, not human being. Asset." My hands shook as I filmed the next segment. I blurred names. I read the line out loud anyway. "This," I told my viewers, "is what people like this do. They write the script before anything happens. They don't just move money, they move stories. They decide ahead of time what you'll believe if something goes wrong. Stress, depression, substance abuse." She was under a lot of pressure. And if the person at the center of it disappears, they already have the phrases ready. I could feel the anger rolling off the comments as the video spread. People latched onto that one phrase, "our asset," like a splinter they couldn't stop touching. Clips of me reading it ended up on TikTok, Twitter, everywhere. Suddenly, the Hawthorne Holiday Inn case wasn't just a niche true crime curiosity. It was a symbol of how power talks about people it considers disposable. Somewhere in the chaos, someone else was watching. Because on the next Christmas Eve, 4 years to the day since Isabella walked toward the snow, something strange happened in Riverwood. No package arrived for Lane, none for the Gazette editor, none for the Hawthorns. The boathouse, which the police now checked out of muscle memory every year, sat empty and undisturbed except for spiders. The snow outside the hotel was plain snow. No ring, no glove, no mocking little tableau waiting under the wreath. For the first time since she vanished, Christmas Eve passed in Riverwood without a single physical reminder from the anonymous puppeteer who'd been stirring the pot. Lane called me from his patrol car, the sound of a heater wheezing in the background. "You know what we found," he said. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing," he confirmed. "I don't know if that scares me more or less." "Maybe they got what they wanted," I said. "Attention, fear, maybe they're bored now. Or maybe they rattled the wrong cage," he said. "People who send taunting packages don't usually know when to quit. Sometimes something quits them." I thought of Andrew in the cafe, how his hands had trembled when he slid me the USB. Of Nate staring at his beer like he couldn't quite clean the soot off his memory. Of Claire twisting a napkin into shreds as she described Isabella's face. Of the ledger pages in her neat handwriting asking, "Who is Ghost?" "Do you think we'll ever actually know?" I asked. Like, no, no, not just internet theory, no. I think if we're lucky, we'll get a confession from some mid-level stooge who can't sleep anymore, Lane said. He'll give us just enough to charge someone nobody's really afraid of, and the big fish will swim off into a golden retirement. We'll call it closure. We'll all clap. There was a pause. Or maybe some kid who grew up hearing whispers will get drunk one night and spill everything to a camera like yours. Either way, I don't think it ends in a courtroom. "Optimistic," I said. "Realistic," he corrected. "Justice and truth are not synonyms, you should know that by now." I did know, but I also knew that stories have power of their own. That night after hanging up, I sat in the dark with my tiny second-hand Christmas tree blinking weakly in the corner and opened the original video again. Isabella in the red dress. The lobby. The tree. The way she turned toward the camera, mouth shaping that silent word. I zoomed in until the pixels broke, until her face became blocks of color. It didn't matter. I knew the shape of her expression by heart, not panicked, not oblivious. Resigned, like Claire said, furious, determined. "Maybe you knew," I said softly to the frozen image on my screen. "Maybe you knew the story wouldn't end with you. Maybe you were counting on that. Will we ever find her body? I don't know. Will someone eventually crack under the weight of what they did and walk into Lane's office, or a reporter's, or a confessional booth and finally spill the details of that night? Maybe. Or maybe this will remain one of those cases that sits at the edge of collective memory, unsatisfying and sharp, reminding us that some crimes don't get wrapped up with a bow. What I do know is that as long as people like you keep asking, did the story end there? The answer will stay no. It didn't end when she walked into the snow. It didn't end when the fire sprinklers turned old paper to pulp. It didn't end when an accountant's car was found empty, or when a fiancé decided fear outweighed love, or when a detective was told to let it go. And it definitely doesn't end on that line in the cafe, or with an empty boathouse, or with a Christmas Eve that finally passed without a package. It keeps going every time someone hits play and hears about the heiress who vanished on Christmas Eve. Every time someone in a small town looks at a powerful family and realizes they're not untouchable just because their name is on a building. Every time a hotel worker remembers a detail they were told to forget and whispers it to a friend, or a bar regular corrects a rumor with, "No, that's not how it went," or a girl sitting cross-legged at her kitchen table opens an anonymous email and decides not to look away. As long as her story is still being told, the people who erased her don't get the last word. If this story resonated with you, please like this video. Your support means everything to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the powerful stories we have in store. We've got many more stories about strong people facing difficult fates, stories that may just change the way you look at the world. Share this video with friends because someone right now might need to hear exactly these words. Remember, you owe nothing to anyone except yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you like the story? Where are you listening from? Thank you so much for your sweet support, and I can't wait to read your comments. On the screen, you'll find 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more to come on the channel, so subscribe and stay tuned for the next story. With love and respect, see you soon.